To say hello to everybody. I'm Anita Mueller, and Helen twisted my arm and got me to come today. It's all her fault. But I was reading your packet with great interest to see how you're coming along and see that you're going to re-examine what we did 18 years ago when we started this open space committee, and I think 18 years is a good time to remodel, maybe. Just two offhand comments about what you're doing today. The long discussion in part of this about disposition of property is something that we did look at the time, because we actually, before we even got started as an open space committee, we had a lot of open space because of open space subdivisions and little pieces that were given to us by developers along the years. And I called them little wedges and smidgens and little pieces here and there, and we did look into a lot of that, maybe, you know, turning it into more productive property, but did not get very far because there generally tended to be real reasons why those pieces were not developed at the time. And valuable pieces, and a lot of pieces that were given to the town as with a lot of stipulations put on them, so they weren't just, you know, readily available. So there seemed to be, in your document to me, there seemed to be an outrageous amount of time given over to disposition of property and about this much for acquisition. So I just thought I would mention that observation. It's if you think you're going to monetize our open space, I think you're going to get a lot of pushback from the community, a lot of pushback. And my second observation, unrelated to that, is it really going to cost $100,000 to do a study that you want of the open space plan? $100,000?
Yes.
How much did we pay for the pedestrian plan?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
The one that just came in?
Yeah, I don't know. That contract was done before I got here, but I don't know.
That's, I mean, I don't know what goes into this plan. I've never seen what an open space plan looks like, and maybe there's a lot more science to it than I have anticipated, but still, that, as a taxpayer, that seems to me to be a really, really large amount of money, and I would be cautious about spending that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. Anyone else?
I'm Diane Nash. I was not going to speak, but now that Anita brought up the disposition of property, I will tell you, as a real estate executive for 20 years, that I was in the management part of both Merrill Lynch and Westledge, which is now Coldwell Bank. If anybody thinks you're going to make money on these little parcels of land that sometimes cause problems because a tree falls, you're not going to. Because everybody that bought in an R40 zone that became an R30 because it was open space, and they gave up a quarter of an acre of their property for the configuration of their houses, so they're not all straight in a row with nice little square lots. And we gave them up so we have open space pieces in our streets. You will be sued as a town by individuals who will say, when we bought this property, we gave up this acreage in order to have this open space. So I would quickly put it out of your brains if you're not looking to get into a real tangle. I do know a few other communities that had attempted to do this and backed off immediately. So it sounds reasonable, because my neighbor who has the adjacent open space piece frankly uses it as if it's his space. And I'm sure if a tree fell down, he'd call the town and ask to have it removed. But we all enjoy driving into our street, seeing that large open space and access to the brook that runs there. So take it off your agenda.
Thank you, Diane. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. So we'll move on to the minutes of September 5th, 2018. Anyone have any additions or alterations, changes? All right. Hearing none, we'll just follow them for the records. And we get to item 3, Parks and Open Space Master Plan Update. Oh, I'm sorry. Tim, would you like to introduce?
Okay.
Maybe we can go around the table and introduce each other again, so that you know who we are.
My name is Tim Walzak. I'm an 8th grade science teacher at Henry James. I've been living in town for 4 years. Love the community. I also coach the high school swim team. Big fan of open spaces. I live adjacent to Stradbrook Park, Banks Road, and my first master's, I wrote a thesis on nature deficit disorder. Kids don't spend enough time in the woods, so it's a pretty big piece of me. So.
All right, great. I'm Marjorie Winters. I'm the chairman of the Conservation Commission on Wetlands.
Susan Messino, Open Space Commission. Helen Peterson, Open Space Member at Large.
Yeah, David Bush, I'm Chairman of Park and Rec.
Dave Ryan, I'm Chairman of the Zoning Commission.
Bill Rice, Chairman of Planning Commission.
And Maria Capriola, Town Manager. And we also
And
have
Eric Wellman's on the phone. Hi. Welcome.
Marjorie, rereading the minutes from September 5th, I think maybe my comment may have been captured a little too succinctly on page 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, where it says Mr. Rice stated that he would like for the master plan to identify any current open space parcels that could be sold. I think what I was trying to convey to the committee is any that could be dispositioned. From my perspective, it's not a way for the town to make money. It's just that there may be odds and ends that do fit certain criteria for some form of disposition.
And the disposition could also be to
Give it away.
land trust to the state if it's adjacent or something like that.
Right.
Perhaps. Yeah. All right.
Could add it to the tax rolls.
All right, so make note of that and then file them as members. All right. So now on to item 3, Parks and Open Space Master Plan Update. Who's going to be?
So we received 5 requests back from our 5 proposals back from our RFQ. The firms were Beta Group, Dodson and Flinker, Mylone and McBroom, Fitzgerald and Halliday, and Weston and Sampson. They've all had experience doing some of these similar projects in other communities. Dodson and Flinker is a smaller firm. They were subcontracting out. They were one of the ones that partnered up with was it TO Design, I think they partnered up with. As a smaller firm, they didn't have all the resources to do a project like ours. And Fitzgerald and Halliday, I believe, is going to subcontract out some of it as well. At the moment, the staff has all reviewed the 5, staff and some of the commission members as well have reviewed the 5 RFQs, and I believe we've selected 3. We were waiting for Maria's.
Yeah, now we have a tie.
Oh, we do. So we may be at 4.
We may be at 4.
4.
We may be at 4. We can make it work.
Which we will interview. Requests have been sent out to, I believe are going to be sent out to those vendors shortly for an interview on January 30th. At that point, we'll do those interviews and then shortly thereafter select one of the candidates. I personally sent out the proposal to over 20 firms. It was on the state's DAS website, it was on the town's website for well over a month. We only received 1 question back to the RFQ, and that was concerning the budget set aside for it. Ironically enough, 4 out of the 5 proposals were right around that number that we had to post. Other than that, I've talked to some other communities, and for the scope that we're looking for, that budget is fairly well in line. It's not significantly greater or smaller than what other towns have spent for, and our RFQ is, we have many of us have talked back and forth. It's a fairly large scope of services. Had it been smaller, obviously the cost would have been smaller. Some of the RFQs do include some add-ons as well that, will come up during the interview process, I'm sure. And I know some of the members have expressed some concerns about subcontracting out certain parts of it, and I'm sure that'll come up during the interview process as we go forward. But we did only receive 5, so we have to we're working within those 5 at this point. So that's my part of the update, I guess, unless you have anything you want to add.
Just that we're also preparing an outline for what we want to ask the firm so that they come prepared with the presentation, and to also leave time for the question and answer session with the panelists. So we are hoping to get that out to the group that's reviewing the RFQs. Hopefully,
It did go out this morning.
It did go today, definitely by the end of the week. And again, we're just trying to put something together so again that all the firms come in on a level playing field and are presenting us with similar information. And again, trying to also address whatever areas of particular interest that we have or any concerns that will be fleshed out. But again, leaving us some time for some question and answer with each of the firms as well.
Yeah. And 3 out of the 5 have done work recently with the town, and some of them have done multiple jobs for the town recently and are doing some work with the town right now whether it's the Board of Ed or projects with us. So we're familiar with a few of them already.
My question was, what if, what if it turns out that we don't like any of the firms or their response to the RFQ? We have to, I'm not expecting that will happen, but we could just.
We can repost.
We could repost or, regroup or something like that. Okay.
Or they might like a portion of the RFQ and not another portion.
That's true. Yeah.
I think that's likely. Okay. Anything else? All right. Moving on to 4 old growth forest designations. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so that's my item for this meeting. This is something that came up some time ago. Combination of, kind of my general forest interest and research. So I'm particularly interested in this for Belden Forest because it is a small old forest in town next to the library, next to the Veterans Memorial. And it turns out that we have, of all the forests in Connecticut, which is a naturally forested state, less than 0.5% of the forest is real old growth forest. And there's very little plan to leave any other forest to become old growth forest. So in my kind of figuring this out and doing a little bit of research on it, I came across this organization, the Old Growth Forest Network, which is dedicated to trying to designate publicly accessible older forests that either are old growth forests or will essentially become kind of a natural forest where there's no plans to log it or extract things or build things on it. So a good choice for forests for this network would be forests that are owned by towns or the state or where that's their purpose, is for conservation and ecology and wildlife. So anyway, I also found out during that process that Connecticut doesn't have any forests in this network. There are 90 forests in 21 states, and Connecticut had none. So I thought, wow, we are in a really unique position to maybe have the first forest in this network. So I applied to be the Old Growth Forest Coordinator for Hartford County, and I'll just admit it publicly that my one main reason was so that I could hopefully be able to get this designation, particularly for Belden Forest in town. So this has been kind of percolating along for a while. It's been discussed with Eric Hammerling, the Director of Connecticut Forests and Parks, who used to be here at the Farmington River Watershed, with HISTED, which is a forest research ecology institute affiliated with Harvard Forest. I've talked to Connor Hogan, the new director of McLean Refuge, and he came out and walked the forest with me. And we also had Bob Leverett, who's kind of the recognized old growth forest expert for the East Coast. So anyway, there's some interest in it, and the next step would be essentially to have the Board of Selectmen sort of vote that they would be interested in having this designation for the town. So just some details in case you didn't have the opportunity to read the frequently asked questions. There's actually no legal restrictions, there's no requirement or legal restriction. It's essentially just an accolade and an acknowledgement of community support for the forest. So that's just a brief overview, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if people had any questions or concerns.
Yeah, I have a question, Susan. So first of all, I thank you for bringing this, to our attention. My question is, I understand that if it's not anything that is binding and it's more of a show of our community support, how would you answer someone's question who said, well, what's the upside of doing this? What are we, why is this something that you're so passionate about?
Well, I think the upside, number one, is just kind of recognition for our community. Number two, it's kind of a piece of being able to kind of put this forward for the future, that people would know that this forest was kind of intended to be left alone. And I think that gives people a lot of, additional kind of affiliation with and sense of place if they know that that place is intended to be like that. And it's also kind of a public education that our forests are all primarily, except for 0.05%, are recovering from all of New England practically being deforested. So there's very little of our original forests left, and now's the time to kind of designate some of our older forests to become kind of self-sustaining, ongoing forests. I mean, the other upside is then except for dealing with any adverse conditions like invasives or public safety issues, it would be off Tom Tyberski's lists of properties to worry about some kind of a maintenance plan for. It would be more a monitoring and dealing with any problems, not something that he has to keep on making plans for and using town resources for that. So those would be just off the top of my head some of the benefits.
Great, thank you.
I would
So
think,
with this designation, if there was like a tree that was possibly endangering a path, that could still come down?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yes. There's no restriction on anything.
Yeah.
So, and of course, I mean, our goal in town would be public safety is a priority no matter what. So if there's a tree, or if there's a weird invasive species, or wild boars get loose and are running around Belden Forest, we can still deal with that.
Okay, great.
I'm just bringing that up because that was brought up as a serious issue of an invasive species. So some communities have problems with wild boars and we don't,
we
so.
do in Syracuse.
Okay. That's right, we have there.
True.
Not yet. Somewhere I read that it could not be part of a master plan for maintenance. Why would that be?
It could be,
It
yeah,
has
it
to be.
couldn't be.
It
That might
must
be
be
an
part.
error. It still would be part of our master plan in terms of a
You
property
just said
that
that it
the
would be
town-
off his list, and I thought I read that it was incompatible with our
For an actively managed.
For going in and logging it and taking out trees in that way. But it's still part of our kind of ongoing town.
We do those things in the
maintenance plan.
interest of the public, and why would we not do them? Why
Well,
would
we could do them for safety or whatever, but it wouldn't be,
Our forest management plans currently, as the proposed forest management plans as they're written, have an element of logging in them. They do not generate an awful lot of money. We reviewed them in the Conservation Commission. There was a lot of debate among the commission as whether or not we need to manage them by logging them, or whether we can leave, as Susan said, as self-sustaining. I mean, forests tend to be self-sustaining anyways. So there are two schools of thought about that. But the idea for an old forest designation is that to leave it, this one's almost there. I think the trees were recorded about 120 years, if not more, and that's getting up to the area of, they're essentially our old growth forests at this point. So we'd just be letting it continue. I mean, a windstorm could come in and blow it down, and that would be that. It would start all over again. But there was really there's no advantage there's schools of thought that there's no advantage going in and chopping down trees to make the other trees healthier. I mean, you get the logging equipment in there. It's harmful to the forest to do that. So we have plenty of forest in town that are logged. We don't, it's not that we don't have any of those, it's just, we don't have any that are set aside as just to be left alone to self-sustain.
I'm still confused
What is the?
if there is an impact of this designation by the selectmen, that you can't do something, then it's not true that it has no impact.
There is no legal restriction. It's basically just a designation of support that we support having this just be a forest that we're leaving alone.
One of the
There's
things,
no legal restriction on anything.
I've lived in Simsbury since '86, and it took me up until about a couple of years ago before I found Belden Forest. And I don't know if you've walked through Belden Forest, but they are very impressive trees, lovely old white pine trees. I was stunned that this thing was right in the middle of downtown Simsbury. But I had a hard time finding it over the years. And I think a designation like this might get other people into this forest and see what these are by Connor Hogan, who's the director of the Plain Game Refuge. He walked the woods and he was stunned that these trees were there. So it's a treasure that we have in Simsbury. The current forest management plan draft that we have for that area, it says, well, let's just cut them, cut a few of them down. And I don't know that would be in the best interest of the resource, or they wouldn't be as impressive if we went in for active management.
I also forgot to mention that Jerry Toner told me that Yale came out, I think about 30 years ago, and saw Belden and said, oh, this is an amazing little forest, you should never really touch it. And that was kind of forgotten when we contracted someone to write a plan for the forest, and I think there's also some deed restrictions that weren't taken into account. So, I mean, there's a number of experts, Yale, and, I think there's a preponderance of opinion that there's no reason to go in there and do anything. But this designation doesn't prevent that if there was a preponderance of evidence that made it that it was important to do something.
This is Helen, Eric. I'd like to add my 2 cents piece here. We're talking about the forest, and it's not only about the well-being of a forest, it's the well-being of us. It's something that we have learned over the last, maybe just recent history. Conservation science has just taught us what the value of an old growth forest is. Just to mention a few things, here in New England, Connecticut especially, we really suffer poor air quality because of what we get from the Midwest, not what we generate. And here we have the opportunity to preserve some forests that really work for us. It will clean the air. It's a carbon sink. We know the information there, but the fact that we can rely on a forest to keep us breathing better and more healthily, it's a unique gift. I'm also thinking of how this is an opportunity for us to really educate the public, an opportunity for everybody to understand what conservation science is trying to teach us. It's our job, as this committee especially, to be sure that we get the education out, to inform our citizens. The fact that, if you want to look at the PR part of it, or just a little tad, we have the tercentenary coming up. I mean, it's an observation I'm just making to say, why can't we show our intent to promote something that really has so much positives going for it? It's hard to find the negative. You can dig and you still can't find a negative. If you consider the Belden Forest historically, it's been lucky. Where it is, it's hard to get in there with equipment. Its size makes it lucky too, because it doesn't provide, the timber that you might get, out of a management plan. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm going to just mention something that I was going to mention later in the meeting, that when we have this kind of conversation in this committee, when we have the opportunity to discuss something so important, we're going to have to train ourselves a little bit. And by that I mean, there is so much in language. We have to learn terms and what they mean so that we can collectively use them properly, so that we can address the subject at hand. For instance, the word stewardship means so much to so many different people. The word management means so much to so many different people. The word maintenance means so much to so many different people. And we have to come together as a committee, study those words, determine how we want to use them, and be consistent in how we use them in our conversations, because it then can be meaningful to us and also meaningful to what we want others to know about our work here. So that's just my little ahead thing that I thought I should put in here, because those words are right here in this topic as well. Maintenance, management, stewardship.
Question I'd have, being that I'm new to this group, so I know nothing of the Belden Forest, other than I understand the Belden Forest is somewhere right around the library. What kind of acreage are we talking about?
It's
What's-
about 40 acres.
And the topography of that area?
It's, you go
The
up a
ridge.
slope and then it's kind of a little ridge there.
It has trails in the back that you can run on.
Well, so I understand you got behind First Church, and then if someone was just to give me an idea of the boundaries, in other words, it's
Okay,
it's
you
the
go-
library, behind First Church,
All the way over to Firetown Road,
okay?
to where the country club is.
Yep.
Right across there is another, all that ridge goes all the way to Belden Wood Road.
Okay,
That's it.
okay, got it.
It's a pocket forest.
Second question is, so how long has this organization been around?
Which organization?
The old forest,
You'll go forth.
the old road forth. Just, in other words, again, I'm being introduced
Maybe
to,
10 years, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
being introduced to this organization, because
Maybe less.
if this has no strings attached and has all this designation benefit of support, of town support and things like that, I guess I'm missing, then why hasn't this been exploding across the country,
It's-
that more towns, cities, what have you, have jumped on board? Because when I hear we're the first ones in Connecticut, I ask, there's got to be a reason why. And when I hear that there's only 20 out of the 50 states, there's got to be a reason why. I do understand that some states may have less forests than others. So, what do we know about this organization and others' experience with the organization?
So their goal has been, initial goal was one forest in each county. So they've kind of tried to do more of a sampling rather than get as many as possible. So I think they could get a lot of forests in maybe an area where one has been designated, but they've been focusing on trying to breadth rather than depth. I might be wrong about the 10 years, I don't know the exact start date, but I know it's been featured recently in the Washington Post. The executive director's written a number of books that have been well received, so I think it's kind of percolating along. And when, in this document where it says there's, I think, 67 forests in, when I initially submitted this, 67 forests in 16 states, I compiled this maybe a year ago, I'm not sure, but now I know it's 90 in 21 states. So it is, coming along.
Maybe this is a simplistic response, but maybe it's because we're known for cutting down our forests or for overmanaging our forests, so that there may not be that readily available old growth forests in our part of the country. Out west you have a lot more, but the New England area has been changed so often.
I think it's
by
also-
man.
I
So
think-
we may not have that many that have been identified yet, but this is a way to help communities become aware, other communities to become aware, go looking for the old growth forest that might be there that they did not know anything about.
Connecticut in 1830 was about only 20% forest, the rest was farmland. And so there's been a dramatic change in the reforestation. As the farms are abandoned, the forests are grown back. So we have a lot of young mature forests. We don't have that many old. For the forest to be untouched for a long period of time, they have to be on areas that were not good farmland.
Right.
So there might not be that many forests that sort of are designated. There was one in Cornwall, the Cathedral Pines, and people would come to just wander through Cathedral Pines. That's one of the things I'd love to see for Belden. Very few people in Simsbury know about Belden. This designation might get people to know that we have this treasure right in the middle of things. And because it was in a sort of an isolated place on the top of a ridge, it wasn't good farmland, so it was left to grow. So it's pretty much almost there. And the designation might give it the publicity to allow people to appreciate. I know I just went on a trip out to California and saw the redwoods. These guys are impressive too. These are our redwoods of the that and the chestnuts that we don't have anymore. But these are impressive trees that we have in this little pocket forest.
Did you see the article in the paper yesterday or today about walking in the woods for mental health? Did you see
No, I
that,
didn't.
the picture? Okay. You know, it's very apropos to this conversation. You've got a pocket forest right in the middle of town that we could take advantage
And
of.
people can find
For
out where it is.
helpful reasons.
Well-
People can find out where it is.
Yeah, that's the start.
Could I just add one comment to yours? When Cathedral Pines was knocked down by winds, it might have been tornado, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was.
And everyone was heartbroken about it because it was such an attraction. The next sentence was, the next tallest and best thing we have is Belden Forest in Simsbury. It was considered much smaller, but comparable.
This is another
to
thing we can add to the
Cathedral Pines.
website to attract people in.
Yes.
If we can show them where the entrance to Belden Forest is.
Well, I think that's the second step, is working on that.
Yeah.
And just
25, 30, maybe 40 years ago, when I first started walking Belden Forest, I used to approach it very easily. You know where the little chapel is behind the main church?
Boy
that
Scout.
Boy Scout Hall.
Yeah.
That they added on, I don't know exactly when. Right behind that spot was an easy access.
You can get
That's the
through
way I
Belden
used
Woods.
to enter
You
it.
can enter through
And that
Belden Woods.
became, and it was just blocked off. We couldn't use it anymore.
What species are involved here?
White pine and birch are the main species.
In terms of tree
Tree
species,
species.
yeah.
Yeah.
Beech.
White
I'm
pine
sorry,
are not my
beech, I'm
favorite.
sorry, beech.
Beech and
I'm
white
always
pine,
saying birch,
yeah.
I meant beech. Sorry.
I said white pine are not my favorite. They seem to fall down and create a lot of mess.
In the forest, it's not a mess, all those things that fall down from the trees, I mean, these are well limbed up, the canopy's way up there. When that material falls down onto the forest floor, it provides habitat for salamanders and insects and all the rest. It's different when it's near your house. Yes. But in the forest, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, there's a lot of educational opportunities too. I was delighted to find out that the white pine was also one that was the symbol of the American Revolution. There was a white pine tree rebellion in New Hampshire. All the trees were marked for shipmasts. And,
Yeah, the
and,
kings.
yeah, it's an interesting piece of history. But this is why the English wanted those white pines. That was the technology.
The king,
The king. Yeah.
his masts.
Yes.
Yeah, I note that on the action requested, it was looking to have a vote on this. I'm going to just give my personal comment that I would much prefer to have an opportunity to go visit the site, as well as research a little bit more about this network. When it sounds too good to be true, it just scares me that there's something that, in language, that may be something we need to talk about. I love the idea. The idea is, let's find a way to give this a designation to get people to go visit it. But I think if we're going to do that, I don't feel personally that I'm prepared, because I don't know the property and I don't know the organization that we're adopting and essentially sanctioning well enough at this point. But if a vote is taken, I just wanted to make sure the record was clear that I'm not against it. I just feel like I want to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So I'll just add one more. The reason why this has become a little bit time sensitive is I have received another submission from Enders Forest in Hartford County, and I know there are 3 forests in Litchfield County. I think 2 belong to land trusts, I think Cornwall and the one that starts with a C. And the Nature Conservancy is probably going to transfer Ballyhack, which was kind of like Cathedral Pines, to a land trust, and we're expecting those to come up in Litchfield County. So I know they're having meetings like this month and next month about that. So that's also why it's become a little bit time sensitive if we wanted to do this.
So am I understanding that they only allow one county,
They
one
don't
designation to
allow
come?
only one. I'm just saying, if we want to be the first, I'm falling down on my job if I don't now entertain this Enders.
Oh, no, I get where you go with it, I just wanted, you've seen that they would encourage anybody to
Sure,
adopt that
they're
designation.
happy.
Because it's in the public interest and in their interest for them to become more well-known.
Right.
But it's always nice to be first, as long as you know what you're getting into.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're not asking for any money, they're not trying to fundraise or conflict with our local land trusts or anything like that. So,
That's what leads to David's question and my question, why?
I think that, I'll tell you why. Joan Maloof is an ecologist, and she's realized that it's a crisis, that we're not leaving any forests alone. So what she knows, that it takes literally hundreds of years for the biodiversity and complexity to be attained that's in these old forests. And that is something that isn't really appreciated by people. And unless we start designating some forests now to be left alone, that biodiversity and complexity will be lost. Just in these regular forests, there are things that we still have not even discovered. In this biodiversity project down in the Appalachian Mountains, they've discovered over 900 new species. So we don't even really know what we have in our forests, and unless we purposefully leave some alone, we never will. So that's why she did it, out of a personal mission, basically, as an educator. That's why. That's what I'm saying. She's not trying to ask us for money. She's not trying to do anything except for write books and participate in this organization's mission. That's it.
I know public audience is over, but your comment about why. Why do we bother having, we're a silver town for a bicycle. We could ride bikes before. Why did we work to get the designation? It's a feather in our cap to say, we care so much about our open space. We're spending $100,000 to have a plan that unifies it. This gives us a designation without us costing anything except the research that everyone has done to date, that this qualifies as a perfect spot for that designation. So when you say no strings attached and good publicity, to me as public audience person, it's a no-brainer. And I'd love to see you move ahead on it, because first in the box, Simsbury took a lot of credit. We were, the first silver designation. Now other towns have, I think there's 1 or 2 other towns.
Silver level 1.
So.
And if it's any, if it will help, the forest ecologist, forester from the Plains, was extremely impressed with building the forest. I mean, and he knows his trees, so.
Nope, same comment, not saying I'm against it.
No,
Just,
I hear you.
not at
I
all.
hear you.
I think it's
I
a good
would encourage
idea.
everyone to go look. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a lovely place.
I have a question about the Board of Selectmen. Did they, at the time that it was presented to them before, did they take the opportunity to do a walk?
I don't think so,
sidewalk.
but actually, your comment maybe aligns with what I was thinking, is maybe we can vote today and then plan a walk before it goes to the Board of Selectmen and
Or
invite the
invite the
selectmen
Board
to
of
come.
Selectmen to
Well,
take,
exactly.
let's do
And then
2
if,
in 1. We can-
Mr. Bush wants to do some more research in the meantime, he could speak at the Board of Selectmen meeting and and say whether you're in favor or not at that point, then the Board of Selectmen would also have the chance to take a look as well. That might be a way to kind of move it along, but still have a kind of a checkpoint in the meantime.
Well, then can we make the motion as you have stated it for us, Maria, and then that will
Let's see where we.
promote the next step.
So,
So I move that moved effective January 2nd, 2019, to recommend to the Board of Selectmen to authorize the town manager to sign the Old Growth Forest Network's memorandum of agreement to include Belden Forest in the Old Growth Forest Network. And to add an addendum, how can we say it? Help me. That we
Conduct a joint field visit.
schedule a site walk with the committee and anyone else who wants to come, especially the
And
Board of Selectmen.
And what's the value of doing it after voting on, a positive referral, essentially?
I thought
I think
this
she's
would
trying
sort
to
of
keep, I think she's
advance
trying to
it
keep
to
this
the
moving.
next step.
It's
We
probably
don't
the only
meet for
reason that
another
you're voting
2
tonight,
months.
is if you want to keep it moving. Yeah,
But what's the outcome of the walk through the
I
forest?
think it gives the Board of Selectmen a little more info. They might be able to, kind of a question, a little more info ahead of their possible vote on that.
and I think
I
there
was
was
mostly-
concern that we hadn't, you hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I was
I don't know
basically
if you've
suggesting
seen
it
the forest.
because
Have you
Dave Bush
seen the
hadn't
forest?
seen
I've
it.
not walked through it, no. but-
Yeah,
Have
so
you
then
walked through it?
anybody could.
It's- So, I think once you walk through it, it's like, this is a very nice forest, but if you don't see it, you don't have any.
Oh, no, walking through is no problem.
Yeah.
My dog's always looking for somewhere new to go.
That's good, it's a good place, it's a good
We can
place.
say dogs are welcome on the walk.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? Can we add,
Do we have a second for, all right, so,
so for discussion, right?
Yes.
So can we add the addendum to that part of the motion? Would it be helpful from your perspective to?
Sure.
See, we don't meet but every 2 months. By the time you execute step by step, we do lose some critical opportunity.
we need to get out
So,
quickly before the snows come.
There's no
I hadn't
snow
thought
this
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will.
Right, so one approach that we could
I
take.
can't twitch my nose for that one, I'm sorry.
That's all right. One approach we could certainly take, if you also recommend to them that we conduct some sort of a field visit or site visit, is that would be part of the recommendation from this group. I also suspect that because conservation does play a role in the management, that the board may at least want to consider a referral to conservation as
Yeah,
well.
we spent, conservation has spent quite a lot of time with the forest management plan.
Yes,
We could also invite them to.
on the site visit, right. So they have a meeting coming up on January 14th. So I could always make sure that we get this on the agenda for the January 14th meeting. And again, they may want to do the site visit, they may want a little more time. They have a second meeting in January as well, so it may be a 2-step process where, maybe it's information gathering, it's conducting the site visit, but not actually taking any action one way or another. I would suspect probably until the end of January. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of process?
Yeah, I think that suggestion makes sense. And I honestly, I think that if we, as the Board of Selectmen, get a positive referral from open space and from conservation, I think that would make it an easier conversation for us. I don't see a downside to it. I think it makes a nice statement.
Board of Selectmen meet every 2 weeks.
Yes.
Twice a month. We meet every 2 months. I would suggest to this committee that if we are going to take these steps in order to go forward, that this committee certainly could be willing to have a special meeting if it needs one. I'm not saying it does, but I'm just saying we could have a very brief special meeting, it wouldn't hurt us.
Well, I guess the
To-
walk would be the special meeting.
Okay?
And then post it.
Whatever.
Okay. Did someone second it?
Yes, Tim did.
A second.
Okay,
Alright,
good.
So any further discussion?
So what's the addendum?
There's gonna be
Schedule
a
a
walk before it goes to the Board of Selectmen.
A joint walk.
So you're not voting on my motion?
We are voting on that motion.
Okay.
With the addenda.
Okay, with the addendum, thank you.
Yes.
That confuses me too.
No, that, now
I
I'm
think we should
clear.
just have the motion as it is here, okay?
Yeah.
And then add that we also suggest that a special meeting be held to give the opportunity for conservation and the Board of Selectmen to walk the property prior to making their final decision. Because, you know, the way this is written, let's see, to recommend to the Board of Selectmen, okay. Yeah, so it's a referral, okay. I don't want the walk to have any contingency on our vote. That's my concern.
I see, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
No, and that would be my understanding. It's not a contingency, it's just a suggested action.
Right.
To be more informed about what this is all about and where it is.
I think this committee is satisfied, I'm satisfied, that it's the right thing to do, without taking a walk. But if we want to show a little more interest to the other commissions, let's put it in like that.
All right, so, no, I'm confused.
So now we're gonna go with the
Without
motion as written and just add a suggestion to that motion. Okay.
That would be my addendum to Helen's addendum.
We start over with the
Yeah.
motion? I'm not a chairperson, I don't know.
Do you want to withdraw, we'll start fresh, with that you are making the motion as stated, and with the suggestion as,
That a site
Well,
visit,
you-
ready?
visit.
Site
I
visit
visit.
take place, inviting the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission with the understanding the site visit will be done in a timely manner in light of the Board of Selectmen's meeting schedule.
Yeah.
Is that close enough?
that sounds good.
Sounds
All right.
good.
So
Thank you.
you're second, all right, so second, or motion and second,
As amended.
and no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
No, abstain.
Abstain, all right. All right, good, thank you. All right, and we'll work on some.
Do that.
Yes, yes, we will.
All right, now I've lost two chunks there. All right, so, moving on to 5 policies and procedures, acquisition guidelines and criteria, and stewardship policy amendment guidelines. So who is taking the lead on this one?
We'll just,
Okay.
I can just jump in very quickly, then I think I'll turn it over to Helen, if that's all right. And I also just want to note, Helen and I had a very good conversation today, and she shared with me that we do actually have an acquisition policy on the books from 1999. That was something new I learned, and something new that I think some of my staff members learned, so I want to thank Helen for bringing that to my attention.
Exhibit A.
It is, and I will make sure we get that out to everybody, because that was something new that I learned today. But this was just something I've spoken a bit with Eric about in the past, but just again, with me being new, I thought it would be helpful if we could work on creating a comprehensive document that would include things like acquisition, stewardship, land management, sort of our general philosophy and care of open space, but also our agriculture plans as well. And that I thought that with so many new committee members, new staff members, that this might be a really good opportunity to start thinking about that as a future project, to see if perhaps some folks from this group might be interested in working on that project. Also similarly, perhaps also looking at the existing ordinance, because that hasn't been updated in 18 years, to see if there are any changes to the ordinance that should be made. So those are just some future projects that I thought could be of value. But I know Helen has had, I think, some similar
Could you repeat that again for me?
Sure, just that I think you had some similar interest in a stewardship policy.
Okay. I did send a letter to the committee.
Oh, is
and they
Maria
don't-
done? I didn't know if
Yeah,
Maria.
I'm all set.
You're done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, she's done. Go ahead.
Oh.
I thought Maria was gonna keep going.
No, good.
I sent you a letter. My letter was generated as a result of going through the process with the master plan. And as you know, in the last meeting, I did comment to 2 sentences in the master plan, which I mentioned in the first paragraph, how the master plan will guide policy development or develop an official document that will in part guide town policy. And it seemed to me historically that we don't want to outsource our philosophy. We need to be able to state our philosophy. We need to be able to have it in place so that anyone having a discussion in this community about open space has a reference. A vendor needs to know what the philosophy is in the town, from the townspeople. If the vendor decides that, yeah, they need to tweak this or tweak that, That's what they're for. They're there to help us by offering some suggestions. But I felt very uncomfortable feeling that this would give the vendor, let's say, carte blanche, without first knowing how the townspeople really felt about their conservation purpose. And I then put it, and like Maria said, we had the plan. We then did a wonderful job of beginning an inventory. This should be an addendum to this. We had I'm just sort of showing you some examples. We had a discussion in 2016 that had the word stewardship in the title, but it was really a discussion that was generated by wanting to consider deaccessioning land. And in that context, I said, oh, we can't talk about deaccessioning before we know what the townspeople feel and how they feel philosophically about their conserved lands. We are remiss in not having put that in place. This is 20 years old. There have been discussions, many times, about stewardship, about management, about maintenance. And they never were, let's say, fruitful. They didn't provide what I am asking for, is that we consider that now is the time, it doesn't have to be long, a page long item that can become an addendum to this document to say how we would like to consider any stewardship of these lands, whether it will be maintaining them, whether it will be managing them, and how we view those processes. And so I'm asking that we take that step. We don't have to do it before the master plan is put together. We can do it parallel to this process. I know, the person or the group that we select to do the master plan was going to provide public audience, is going to provide input from the community and so forth. That's okay. That's part of their process, and that should happen, and it will happen. But what I'm suggesting is slightly different, or not slightly different, it is different, in that we have to profess first how the community wants that vendor to look at our open space. And then we can have the dialogue with them, and we can learn from them, we can gain from them. So let's see, I did also extend to you not only the one-page letter, but I also offered you an outline of stewardship policy discussions that we've had over the years. And I wanted you to know where I got all of that from. I got it from my memory. I checked on minutes of the meetings. I had sought assistance from Ed Faison, who you've heard me talk about before. He's the senior ecologist at Highstead, and he referred me to what he calls the best example of stewardship handbook that guides groups like towns, land trusts, and so forth, how to develop a stewardship policy. It's extremely long. It's like 50, 60 pages long, but it was very helpful. I read through that. I got some ideas from there. I got some ideas from townspeople. Charles Haldeman on the Conservation Commission, Don Rieger had a lot to say over the years, Marjorie, Sue Brackwitz, John Schaefer, Anita, Diane, everybody who has come to speak with us and talk with us. And I tried to I had my notes, and I tried to put together that document, and it's 2 pages. Have you read it? I don't know. Did you do your homework?
I've read everything in front of me. If you give it to me, I read it.
So, anyway,
Be nice to him, Helen.
Oh, it's okay.
He's okay.
I've known Helen so long, she can do anything she wants.
so anyway.
So Helen, how does that differ then?
So these are just, like I said, I gleaned these ideas and some of these practices from all of these sources. And I would like to move, let's put it that way. I don't like to leave things stagnant. And I'm wondering how to get a fire under us, how to inspire us to really consider how we're going to produce this document. Like I said, it's not going to be ready for the vendors, but it can be part of the discussion. They will hear about it. They will know about it through our discussions. So it should be helpful. So I'm asking
So now, how does that,
questions.
so we have in front of us the open space stewardship policy endorsed by the Open Space Committee in April of 2016.
Okay.
How is what you are asking or proposing, doesn't this document encapsulate what you just put on your list?
Absolutely. It can be part of it. All right, let me tell you what I think about this document. That's my personal opinion. And that is, it didn't advance, and I don't know why specifically. I thought it was rather unfortunate that you have the word stewardship in this document, because I felt it didn't do the subject honor. It didn't do it, what we need to do, and I would like to sort of start from scratch. I think Maria has a wonderful idea about trying to consider updating. You know how the POCD is updated by statutory requirement. It doesn't hurt us to consider that that is an important exercise that we should put to every single document and every single plan that this town has. Not only do the conditions change, not only do the regulations change, but also the people change. The people who serve like we do on this committee. So I'm thinking that if we had an opportunity to take this kind of approach, to take what we produced, and it served us well for 20 years. You know, there's a section in here that has, how did we decide whether or not we were going to select a certain parcel of land in town? It was a criteria, and it had a score sheet. It's right there. And we used it to help make these decisions. However, maybe this document needs updating, needs people to look at it. There's people around this table that have never even known it existed. So I'm suggesting that this committee have that job. Now, this particular piece that you just asked about serves its purpose. However, these classifications should be consistent with what's in this document. It should be consistent with what's going to be in this document. And I'm finding that they are not. So I'm saying, I've done enough research. I'm not the best researcher in the world, but it was glaring that we have inconsistencies. And I'm thinking if we could make a concerted effort, I wish we could get another Adam Hammershoy if he's hiding somewhere in the woods finding.
Another intern.
I think it would be beneficial to the town. This is something that as stewards, we should be doing and get it right, because I'm not gonna be here 20 years from now. And I want the person. I dare you. And you dare me. What I'm thinking is, I want the person who's sitting in my seat here to have a real good basis, a real good background upon which to act, upon which to participate. And it's got to be there for them, and we've not done it. So that's pretty much where I'm at with the subject. I could go on, but I hope you understand why I brought it to your attention and why I felt it was important and necessary to do so.
Thank you, Helen.
Oh, one more little piece, I'm sorry. I'm looking at you too, in front of me, and I'm looking at you. I've been there, I've participated in your commissions. I know what you as chairman have to do. You wear that hat. You come to this committee because some ordinance said you had to. And that ordinance
I can
said,
send my designee, you know.
and that ordinance said you had to because in the process of acquiring land, the statute said you have to have an 824, 834, I forgot. Review, 824 review. You have to have, you know, all the land use commissions approve be part of the process. So therefore, that's why you're sitting here. And I'm not suggesting that you have all this time in the world to go do all of this. What I'm suggesting is that we, the committee, provide some way to have it happen. And whether it be with the help of town staff, with, let's say, I'm looking at you, Maria, I know, because I know you're in the budget process. And I think it's so important. If this town is going to have this much land and be responsible for such a large piece of property, that we should have somewhere in our budget, somewhere, enough money to provide a staff member part-time or somebody to help with this kind of administration. So I'm saying that this committee can do this through help from however we find it.
Speaking, Maria, you submitted Mansfield Open Parks, what do they call this?
Oh, it's just,
Planning documents or?
well, yeah, just a guidelines or policy document that we had used. And I just submitted it as a sample, as a way of consolidating sort of all these different concepts and policies into one centralized document that then becomes a living, breathing document. And I thought that, again, as part of what would now be an update, if we could perhaps do something similar in nature, that, again, that becomes something that we all can use, that staff can use, that there's an awareness about it. But that is really just a comprehensive place, again, for our open space parcels as well as our ag lands. And so it's just simply a sample. I'm sure there are other communities that probably have something similar. It's just, that was one that we had used in the community I had worked in most recently before coming here. And to Helen's point, I think if this group is sort of willing to take on this project, a method that we've been using with the Board of Selectmen that I think has been particularly helpful, Eric, you can tell me if you disagree, but is we'll typically establish a work group, and I'll assign 1, 2, in some cases 3 staff members, depending on who has expertise in the area. And so we'll help with research. We'll certainly help with the FOIA requirements, posting minutes, things of that nature, and then we'll form essentially a smaller subset of this group who would really work with us on, and just again helping to research samples, put together draft documents for the larger group here to sort of work through. But I think that the work group method has been, Eric, would you agree?
Yeah, I think it offers a level of flexibility being in a smaller group. Still public meetings, but I think just more free-flowing, casual conversation too is the benefit.
I personally think, I read through the Mansfield Open Space Park and Recreation and Agricultural Properties and Conservation Easements documents, and I was very pleased, I was very happy to see certain things covered that we have not yet covered in any of the documents I've seen from Simsbury. So I would love to see it go forward, and using these sort of as a template, or this and other towns, and see what we can add. And it's always nice not to have to reinvent the wheel. So I think these would be a great jumping off spot.
I'm just trying to hear you, I'm sorry.
Before we start looking for more staff people, I wondered if we could contact Yale School of Forestry, which is one of the top forestry schools in the world, which is right down the road a piece, and which is very interested in Simsbury because of our Gifford Pinchot connection. I have talked to young foresters who say, oh yeah, I know Simsbury, Connecticut. I went up there out of curiosity when I was at Yale and walked around, and they're interested in the roots of the profession. And of course, Susan has contacts at Harvard. Between those two institutions, we should be able to look for an intern who can bring some scholastic talent to this.
Just to add another piece to that, I know that Connecticut Land Conservation Coalition or Conference, CLCC, they're holding that workshop for municipal funding for open space stewardship and grants next week. I know that they do work sometimes with an intern from Yale, and they're in the process of kind of developing some documents that I think might be super helpful for this inserting into this policy thing or kind of aligning or whatever. I know they work very closely with Yale also, that might be an easy bridge because they're always working with towns as well.
Yeah, kind of tacking on a comment that I had earlier, something like the Old Forest designation can help get you attention when you're looking for future grants and so forth. I think of years ago, I was up in, looking through my historic district file, and Dick Davis, head of the land trust, approached me and he said, can you help me out with this application for grant money because we want to buy the Tuller Woods? And I said, well, yeah, the chief of the first Forest Service was from Simsbury, Connecticut, and he said, really? And I said, yeah. Well, that application flew to the top federally, and we got a big federal grant for that particular thing. Something like an Old Forest designation indicates the ethic that's within your community and can go a long ways in applications.
I was also just delighted to see that there was an agricultural portion component to it, because, and I know we don't have enough committees in town, but an agricultural commission or committee would be wonderful, because I know this has come up before, the open space before, that a lot of farmers are reluctant to put the money into our agricultural open space because they only have short leases. We need to look at that. It's not just about the forest, it's about a lot of other open space areas in town.
The agricultural aspect is in the original. It is in there, but again.
But we need to revisit it because it's been a while. I know this was a discussion, I think, about 10 years ago in the open space.
Right, and something that I recognized when I came on board is that when it came to things like open space and agriculture, that it was very decentralized, at least from a staff perspective, and it really didn't have a home. And so we've been working on consolidating that a bit better. And what we did recently with Mike's promotion to planning director, Mike and I have had those conversations. And so we did formally update the job descriptions for our assistant town planner as well as our code compliance officer, so that they can be assigned tasks related to helping with open space acquisition, helping with open space land management plans, and also management of our ag leases and lands. So once we finish rounding out his staff, Robin was recently promoted to assistant town planner. We're now currently recruiting for the code compliance officer. Once that has officially occurred and has been completed, we're going to be taking the ag piece from engineering and moving that over to planning. So I think that's a good step in that direction, again, in terms of having, one department that has more ownership over a lot of this and will be available to assist us. And we've also started working on gathering some samples for updating our ag RFPs and our ag leases. So we've got some work at least at a staff level on that, which I'm also really excited about.
All right, so moving another slide ahead, are you looking for volunteers to serve on committees, or are we there yet, or?
I think if folks feel comfortable with that, Eric, and please, if you disagree, jump in, but I think if we had some volunteers who might be interested in working on that work group, that would be wonderful.
I'd be happy to volunteer.
Any other volunteers?
Just asking time-wise, what do you need?
Well, I think it would depend,
I have
Helen's
some
absolutely,
thought, that's why I'm
yeah.
I was asking time-wise,
Good to know.
when that takes place.
I would say that once the work group gets going, depending on how frequently it takes to turn around documents and review, I would suspect once to twice a month, maybe.
And perhaps we can open it up to other members of the public, or should we just keep it within the commission?
Typically, we.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say one thought is that oftentimes we have, the members of a subset of the committee would serve on the work group, but the work group provides a more informal setting. So if we wanted to, it's easy to open it up for discussion. So if members of the public want to come and play more of a participatory role, I've had success with that in the past.
I'm sorry, somebody help me, tell me what he said.
Should we, forming a subgroup in this committee, could we form a subcommittee of people from the public who might want to participate?
Eric said that's not typically how they do it, but it's fairly informal, so people in the public can still kind of participate, even if it's just a subgroup.
And he's done it before, so it worked.
Eric, can I ask a question? You and I have had the discussion, is this the time, maybe it's already been spoken to and I didn't hear it, about how the Open Space Committee has not really been designated officially as the agency in this town to address stewardship of our public conserved lands. And it is it's just that we've been remiss over the years. Everyone just assumed that we had the policy issue as part of our responsibility. And we found out 2 years ago that we really don't. And it was because it was not stated that way in the ordinance that created this committee, number one. Number two, it comes from the statutes. So we did have an opinion from town attorney a couple of years ago that said, yes, the statute said that the policy issues for stewardship would go automatically to the Conservation Commission, or if the town had a forest commission, and that the Open Space Committee, the way it was set up by ordinance, was only supposed to deal with acquisition. So I am asking that just to be like a housekeeping kind of thing, but it needs to be cleared up, and I think it could be done so simply through Eric and Maria and the Board of Selectmen, because the statute also says that the Board of Selectmen have the power to assign that job to any entity in the town government.
I must say, as the Conservation Commission, when we were dealing with the review of the forest management plans, one of the problems was, it wasn't that the stewardship was a problem, it was that we didn't know what the goals were. And I didn't think it was the proper role of the Conservation Commission to set the goals. It should be planning, zoning, all the different land use boards in the town to set the goals for the, once you have the goals, then you can determine what stewardship you would need to achieve those goals, but it wasn't up to the Conservation Commission to, on its own, to establish those goals. So I would think
we should add that word to our list, because again, goals and maintenance and management.
What we want our land.
We need to have the policy in place first, yes, thank you. So I just wanted
one thing I can
to.
offer a suggestion from a process perspective, and I welcome the conversation, is we could move forward and determine the right folks to serve in a work group, and I think we should be thoughtful about who those right representatives are. And then as part of the recommendation from the group, one would be a recommended policy, but the other would be a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen on who should ultimately own the stewardship of open space, whether it be open space or conservation.
Yeah.
Perhaps it could be, those could be both under this work group's purview.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on item 5?
Any other volunteers?
I'll volunteer because I don't think it's too much.
I'll participate, but I don't want to put myself down as an official volunteer.
Okay. I guess I can. Great, sounds good. Wonderful, I think that would work well.
All right.
Sorry, just because I can't see in the room.
It's a secret.
You'll find out when you show up in the meeting.
Not it. I'll put your hand up.
This one's a little beyond my skill.
Marjorie, and Susan Marshall.
That's great, thank you.
Wonderful.
All right. And so moving on to item 6, updates, oral report, state grange updates.
Okay, so I wanted to put this on the agenda just as kind of a point of information. So as you may know, I'm the vice president of the Simsbury Grange. We have a state grange conference every year, and I've started to kind of know the ropes, and every community grange can put forth items that they're interested in to be part of legislative discussions at the Capitol. So any kind of community thing that you're interested in putting forth legislation, you can put it forth from the community grange, and it would be voted on at the Connecticut State Grange. And then I don't have, it looks like this, but this isn't it. The State Grange puts out every year a little pink booklet and gives it to all of the legislators, and the State Grange has a legislative committee. So I'm actually on the State Grange legislative committee right now. And it turns out that the last couple of years, Simsbury Grange has put forth suggestions under the conservation and ecology topic, which I thought was relevant to this commission, on invasive species, to try and have the state have a little bit more kind of proactive training of municipalities or addressing invasive species. It's the kind of situation where if you would deal with something early, you can save an entire wetland or an entire ecosystem. If you let it go, it then just becomes, it's lost, it's just lost. So we put things together about that. We also put forth support for question number 2, the state public land vote, which is the other item on here. And I just wanted to report that that vote passed by 85% this year. So it's really unusual to pass anything by such a wide margin. So that just, I think, gives you an indication. We've had many, validated questionnaires and phone surveys and, done by outside firms in Simsbury that have shown the very strong public support for our land and our open space and things like that. But now this is a major statewide vote, 85%, to basically say we don't want you, trading away our public land in the middle of the night. So anyway, I just wanted to report on that. And if anyone has any ideas for any kind of legislative things you'd be interested in, let me know, and I'd be happy to write up a draft and put it forth to the Connecticut State Grange. And then be down at the legislature with my little paper.
Any other updates? All right, hearing none. I motion to adjourn. Do we have
I'll move that.
a second?
There you go.
Second.
All right,
There you go.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank
Can
you.
I ask a favor? I tried something new today with this little device hanging here and the one that's on the table. Did you hear anything like an echo? Did you get any
No feedback.
negative
None.
interruption?